Well, it's a couple of days before Christmas here, and the weather it's okay. It's no snow, no rain at the moment, but it's just dull, miserable. Just over a week ago, where this Jag is now, there was a Daimler V8, a 1968 Daimler V8, 250 model, or 2.5, or whatever you want to call it. It's not here at the moment. Actually, it's over there. That's a toilet. No, hang on. Which one? Right. I'm going to tell you the story about this car. I'm going to tell you the truth. And then you can just decide what you think. This is eBay, and I've been a member and been selling and buying items on eBay since 2003. I'm fairly used to it, and my number, sales number, or whatever you want to call it, behind my name is, I think it's about 2048 or something like that. So I've had a lot of transactions on eBay. Bought a lot of cars on eBay as well over the years. And of course the problem with eBay is that you browse through it, and you do, well, I do anyway, I tend to get involved in impulse buying. Certainly I have done on vehicles, and I've bought a couple this year. So about I don't know, 3 weeks ago, I was browsing through eBay, and I saw this advert. Well, this is the advert that I saw, and as you can see, we've got a very nice looking Daimler 2.5. It's 1968, automatic, genuine, 89,000 miles. And it says here that it's reconditioned in good condition. Doesn't sound bad. It's insured for £18,000. Asking price is $14,450. The car is situated in Eastgate, Chichester. And this guy who's selling it, actually, I find out when I emailed him, he came back in his name, or at least the name on his email was Daimler John. So I was quite impressed. And let's read on a bit more about this advert. So there's quite a detailed bit of information about this car, but a lot of it is to do with Daimler John. I mean, he's an incredible guy by the sound of it. I mean, he's so into Daimlers, and he basically a retired man who, and the implication, what he says here is that no stone will be left unturned in his aim to get these Daimlers back on the road and really in good condition, and passed on to new owners. I mean, this all sounds really good. And then he goes into great detail here, well, some detail about the cars and the condition of the car, and breaks it down into different areas. So let's have another look a bit more. Right, so the advert goes on, and I'll just let you read it, because it does actually go on about the history of the vehicle. Then it's talking about the carpet and the engine and the gearbox, the wheels, the tires, the brakes, the steering. I mean, all of this sounds fairly good. He's even listed the tires here that the car has. And then he's got the bad bits. Well, they're always something that we should look at. So the bad bits don't sound too bad. I mean, basically oil leaks here, which he claims are the sump leaking, and it can be repaired fairly easy. And the controls, the heater controls, and a few things which are just basically cables that can be greased and released and eased up, and they'll be fine. So, let's just get to the last page and see what we've got. Right, so here we are. We've got the last page, and he's got a summary here actually that sums the car up. So basically, what this man John, there's his telephone numbers, is saying, this is Daimler John, what he's saying is that he's worked on this car because he's an enthusiast and an expert on Daimlers, and he's described it all really well, and he is offering really a reasonable car in good condition, as he says, with a few minor points, cables that need releasing and a few minor things. And that's where we are. So it was an interesting advert and attracted me. So what I did then was I decided to ring him. So I rang him at his number. I spoke to him for about half an hour. I mean, reasonable guy, really nice, and he got into great detail about all the work that he'd done on this car and how wonderful it was, and that actually all the things that were not right about it, which he did point out, seemed to be mainly just cables that weren't working properly, and a leak. Well, they all leak, he says, but this one, if you just drop the sump down and put a new gasket in, and it'll be fine, and this sort of thing. So anyway, then a friend of mine, that's Ben at Ben X Motors, who is a mechanic, and Ben has had extensive experience with these cars. He's done many of these Daimlers and Jags in his life. He's been doing them for 40 years, I don't know, I shouldn't say it, 40 years probably. So he actually rang him. I didn't know this actually, because I was talking to Ben, because what I was thinking of doing was to, let's just go back a bit here. So as this car was in Chichester, basically it was over 150 miles away from me, so we're talking about a 300 mile plus journey. But I was thinking of going down to see it, so I spoke to Ben, and Ben thought, well, all right, maybe this weekend we'll pop down together and see it. But in the meantime, after speaking to Ben, I rang the guy, John, and I didn't realize, but Ben rang him as well. Ben spent about another half an hour speaking to him, and he asked him all sorts of technical questions, various things that he would, being a mechanic. And the result of it was that we got together, Ben and me, and Ben's view was that this was a good car, you know, that this Daimler John, this Johannes Kroonenburg, down in Chichester here, was selling a really good car that he'd you know, spent a lot of time and effort on. We considered all this and thought, well, is it worth spending the money and the time to do a 300-mile journey, actually more than 300 miles, probably 350-mile journey, to view a car which we both seem to feel that had been described by John as being, Daimler John, as being, you know, a really nice car. So on that basis, I decided to go ahead and make an offer for the car. Now he was asking $14,450, and well, there were some things to do, so I offered him $13,500, which I thought was reasonable. I said I could give him $13,500. I said I could give him $13,000 for the car, and then give him £500 in cash if he was prepared to deliver it to Suffolk. And he agreed immediately. Right. So we agreed on the total price of $13,500. He gave me his bank details, and I agreed that I would do a bank transfer of £13,000 and then pay him £500 in cash when he delivered the car. Now, the weather at that time was not too good. We were having storms, so we agreed that in 2 days' time the weather seemed to be going to be cleared, or clearing, so that would be a Saturday, and on that Saturday he would drive the car up from his home in the old farm, Eastgate, like Chichester he lived. It's a rural area, I guess, and he would drive it up to me. And certainly it all worked out. On the Saturday the weather was good, and he texted me on the way up that he was on his way, and he arrived just after lunch, I think, and as I had already agreed that I would drive him back immediately to the local railway station to so he could catch a train back to Chichester. So he arrived outside in the car, and the weather was quite good now, and the car looked really nice. He immediately started to tell me various things about the car and how it drove, and how to start it because it had an immobilizer and how the immobilizer worked and various things like that. And then he wanted to get on with the paperwork because obviously he was in a bit of a rush. To be fair, he had to get this train and he had to get back down to Chichester and change trains in London and everything else. It was quite an involved journey. So we signed all the various documents, and I gave him his £500 cash, and we had a little chat, and I drove him down, not in the Daimler, but I drove him down to the station so that he could catch his train back to Chichester. By that time, it just started to get dark because the day's quite short, obviously, and it was a bit later in the afternoon. And I got back and had just a general look around the car and started it up. It starts really good. It runs good. He explained that there were some issues with the gauge, the fuel, the temperature gauge. He said it didn't read right because it said that the temperature of the water was high, was too hot. But he said that he'd been testing the water with his Jaguar specialist that he had working on the car, and that the temperature was running correctly, which is, I think he said 80 degrees, which is what the thermostat he had set for the electric fan. He said everything was fine with that, but obviously the gauge was not correct. It was reading too high. Yeah, he pointed out to me the controls where the cables. He said, well, that's not really a problem. Just sort of have a look at these cables and you should be able to release them all and everything else. I must admit that I thought, I wonder why he hadn't done that himself, but still. I guess he had so many other things that he'd done on the car. But anyway, he'd gone back, and now it's getting dark, so I put the car under cover and left it. The next day, Sunday, I think the weather changed. It wasn't quite so good, and I couldn't really do anything with the car. And we got it insured and all that sort of business, and taxed, and all the things you have to do now. And I sort of started up. It started really good. Weather was quite chilly, and started really well, and it sounds really nice. And I kind of drove it around on the grass and on my place, and left it at that. Well, on the Monday morning, I checked the oil and actually found that the oil was just below the level, the low level, so it desperately needed oil. He told me that it used about a litre of oil to every 1,000 miles. Well, that's, I've had many cars that are similar to that, so I wasn't too perturbed about that, but I did think that he'd done about apparently 167 miles to get up to me, and it was below the low mark, so he must have not really checked the oil, or he had it low when he started. So I emailed him and actually asked him what the oil level was when he left, or did he check it and what it was, but I never actually got a reply on that issue from him. The other thing I discovered then was that one headlight was not working, and one parking light, which is up on the wing, was not working. I thought it was a bit odd. There's two lights not working. So I was a bit odd that, so he hadn't checked that. And so I went and got bulbs, and we replaced the lights, got them working. I then discovered that none of the interior lights were working. We got some more bulbs for those and checked, but actually the bulbs inside didn't look as if they'd blown. So there was some sort of problem. There were a couple of switches actually that worked the various lights, as a map light, a reading light or whatever, and interior lights, and nothing was working. So none of the interior lights were working. And there was a faint light on the dash and the dash dials, but not a lot. So there was very little lighting, or none, on the inside, and some of the outside lights were not working. This was the beginning of when I started to get a little bit concerned. For a man who had made this impression upon me and Ben that he was so dedicated to Daimlers, it seemed odd that, you know, the car's got no lights even. I mean, they're sort of fairly basic things to put right. Well, later that evening, I happened by chance to have a word with a friend of mine who owns a Jaguar garage, or a garage that specializes in Jaguars, and he'd heard that I bought this Daimler, so he offered, or made a suggestion that I could take the car down to his garage and they would give it a real good appraisal, look over the car from one end to the other, as it were, and let me know what's wrong with it and what things need doing. I thought, well, that sounds a really good idea. So I got the car taken down there and left it with them, and they were going to work on it. Well, the next thing that happened was I got a phone call from the chief mechanic who said that, well, we put the car on the ramp, and before we go any further, you better come down and have a look. So I actually couldn't get down there. I was too busy. But the result of it was that the car had some issues that they felt I should look at. Now, at this point, what I'm going to do is just put up here on the screen, and here we are. This is the bullet points of the appraisal that this garage presented for me. And you can just read these through and see for yourself what you think. Now, at this point, I sent an email to this Johannes Kroonenburg, or Daimler John, and I said to him that I was extremely unhappy. I emailed him to say that I'd had this appraisal done, and that, you know, this car was not as he described it, basically. And now this is the bit where I'm just going to be honest with you. I was trying to be pragmatic. Hadn't used the car. The car had been delivered to me, and it had gone straight from my place to a Jaguar specialist, and it was still at the Jaguar specialist. So I'd had the report, so I decided, well, I didn't really want to buy a car and get involved with a car that needed work doing to it. So I went back to him, and I said to him that I think there's two options here. Either you take the car back, or I'm going to have to pursue something with you, because the car is not what you sold me. It's not as you sold me. So being pragmatic again, I made him an offer. I said, look, you give me £10,000 and I'll deliver the car back to you on a trailer. So my thinking was, he'll have made himself £3,500, got his car back, and I'm out of pocket for £3,500, but I bought the car I shouldn't have done, because it wasn't the car that I thought it was. I said, but if you don't want that option, then I can't accept the car as it is, and I'm going to have to take some sort of action to recover the funds that you sold me this car, which it apparently does not seem to be what you said it was. Well, his only reaction to that really was indignation, I would say. He came back to me that he was now a victim, apparently, because I was threatening him. He then also said that he would have to think about everything, but could he have a copy of the appraisal report? So I agreed to this, and I agreed to give him some time, and I sent him this report. I sent him a copy of the actual report, which had the heading and all the signed details of the garage, that they certified that this report was true and accurate, in their opinion. I emailed that to him, and he had it. Then he asked me, he said that he would look into it, because now he claimed that he doesn't work outside of business hours and certainly doesn't work weekends. So this was actually now on, I think, a Thursday or Friday, and he would look into this on the Monday. Well, at the end of that Monday, the next Monday, I'd heard nothing from him. Then he came back to me and said that he was seeking advice, and he had an appointment for this advice sometime in mid-January. Well, that was a red line to me, because I thought, this is, not once has he actually addressed the issues of the condition of the car, or my accusations to him that he'd sold me a car that wasn't what he said it was. It wasn't a car that was as it was in the advert. It wasn't the car as he described to myself on the telephone conversation, or to Ben during the conversation he had with him. He didn't address any of these issues. All he said to me was that he would be looking at advice from somebody, I don't know who or what, and that would be in mid-January. Well, and I decided that I would start some action against him. And that's where we stand. I haven't heard a word from him since. Funnily enough, he kept the advert going. I asked him this actually a couple of days after I bought the car. I said, that your advert is still online. And he said, oh, well, I might as well get the most of the money out of it, because he put on the advert that he delivered the car, but he had others in the pipeline. So some lucky people are out there that will be possibly buying another Daimler from this Daimler John. It's early morning here, and just had a phone call from Ben at Benix, and he's just going to pop it down to me. So all the appraisals are being done, and we know where we are really, and we'll have the vehicle back here and then decide what we're going to do with it. Well, here's the Daimler. I think the best thing is just put it round the side. Oi. Put it round the side, up onto the hard up there in front of you. Looks really good, and it sounds really nice.
It does.
Your back door's open, by the way.
Yeah, is it? That's a bit challenging. No wipers at all.
No, they were working. Oh. Well, they were working, because yeah, they were working. They've now packed up. Right, well, that was a long explanation, and I hope you stayed with me on that. But here we are. Well, here we are. Where are we? This is the car. And it's quite a nice place to be, really. I mean, it smells of leather, but I suspect that's this treatment that's been put onto the seats. In fact, it hasn't been on very long, because it's quite tacky as you feel it. I mean, it looks reasonable, and it's had new door cards, which Mr Kroonenburg informed me, and he's right. It's had a new dash top and new headlining, but actually these weren't fitted by him, as he implied. They were fitted by a previous owner. In fact, I'm not certain that Mr Daimler John actually did an awful lot of work on this car. I think he just bought it and sold it on. This is so what have we got? We've got Mr Kroonenburg here, Daimler John. We've got an advert which I've talked about, extolling the joyous feeling that this car is going to give me if I owned it. Right. And we've got a report from a Jaguar specialist, which quite extensive actually. Says a lot about the car. Right. So, what do we do now? Well, we can start the car up. No choke at the moment. Maybe we'll try and put a bit of choke on it. See what happens. Oh, that's better. So choke, at least the choke is working. But one thing that isn't, funnily enough, now are the wipers. They were working, but they decided to stop. So that's a bit worrying. The washers are still working. Yep, there we are, but we've no wipers. Wipers just decided to give up the ghost. Like the lights, which are not working. I'm sure all of these things can be repaired. There is very little in the car world that we can't repair in terms of old cars, because we haven't got this electronic stuff to worry about. Anyway, turn this off. So this is the season of goodwill. Goodwill to all men. Christmas. And I'm not sure how much goodwill we should be handing over to Mr. Daimler John, but so, if anyone's planning to buy a car from this man, they should perhaps look at this video and think on a little bit.